Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Got it.
All right, Professor Dr. Abhisubedi. Well,
You will
we have,
introduce
we have been,
Dr. D.N. Suresh Babu will introduce.
Yeah. So, Namaskar, hearty welcome to 12th session of online literature conference on environment and literature being conducted by Sahitya Academy in collaboration with Foundation of Stark Writers and Literature, that is Postwall. And on behalf of Ajit Kaurji ma'am and Dr. K. Srinivas Rauji, Secretary Sahitya Academy, I welcome all of you to this 12th session. And in this session is devoted for interview and conversation, and each panel is allotted with 15 minutes. And in this, we have Professor Abhi Subedi's conversation with Professor Shivaraj Rinjal from Nepal, and Professor Bimal Guhaji's conversation with Professor Binay Burman from Bangladesh. And may I request Professor Abhi Subedi ji to kindly start the proceedings with the conversation with Sri Shivraj Rinjal ji from Nepal.
Thank you very much. Greetings to Pranam to Didi once again. This is the second time today. Fortunately, I think our modality of conversation as discussed between me and Dr. Shiva Rizal is that
Is a little louder.
louder. She's asking you to speak louder.
you'll come up with questions. You will ask about me, about my works, and then these questions will prompt my answer. That is the kind of modality we discussed earlier. And Dr. Shiva Rizal is very familiar with my works. He has been my colleague, student, and theater person. We work together, and he is very widely experienced person. So in his conversation, I guess I don't know what he wants to talk about.
All right.
But I guess he will talk about my various interests and various works in 15 minutes.
All right, Professor Dr. Subedi, both of us meet in Kathmandu, and you arrived in this city that is known for jatras, festivals, all kinds of rituals.
Yes, many years.
You saw it in late 1960s. You started writing poetry by watching the architectural space of the Kathmandu Valley, the jatras, the native Newars, the Japuj dance. And you saw the hippies, the American or the Western youth coming to this city and celebrating their freedom along with like experiencing quote unquote exotic culture they saw, watched it. Now, by late 90s, you started writing plays, and we find a completely different picture of the Kathmandu in your play. What did happen in between? How did changes occur in your perceptions about Kathmandu? Could you please tell us about the years you saw Kathmandu changing its face and colors?
Yes, I think I didn't know what you were going to ask. You asked the very crux of the problem of my response to the Kathmandu metropolitan culture. When I came to Kathmandu, actually in the 60s, late 60s and early 70s, Kathmandu was agog with what they call the hippies, the hippie youth from the West. When I came to Kathmandu, Kathmandu was an exotic place for me also because I came from the eastern part of Nepal. And Kathmandu was very, very, as you said, architecturally very rich, very cultured place, which it is today, even despite all the attacks on its structure and identity. Kathmandu has still maintained its structure, its still character. And the hippies, I like the hippies actually. Why? Because I was looking for some kind of a companionship in Kathmandu, something exotic, something natural, something very spontaneous, and that is what I saw in the hippies. I also, in some ways, followed some of their methods. I didn't become a fully hardcore hippie myself, but I was very close to them. And my modus vivendi, my style, they were all influenced by the hippies. I was a kind of a hippie in Kathmandu. The thing that this seminar is happening about nature and the ways of nature, natural ways. It is very interesting to recall the style of the hippies who came from the first world, the capitalist world, to this very nondescript old metropolis. And they were seeking for the identity, for natural identity and so on. So that was the first stage, as you asked me, my interest in the exotic characters. I was interested in the characters, their spontaneity and their love for nature. So since there is not much time and you have also very nicely jumped the time, you have moved on to 1990 from the 70s. So that period was a very important period of transformation for me. And why I got interested in theater and performativity was the very color and the performative power of the 60s and the 70s. Youth, they were very spontaneous and creative. And that inspired me to do and put something on the theater and then use that in the academic, like you were one of my students who did the higher studies and I supervise your work. And later, you became interested in the culture, Indic culture outside this region also, and you went to Bali and you studied yourself and you have written a book about that, published from India. So that was the phase when I trained the students and then also wrote plays and found the directors, worked together and then took these plays on the stage. So that was a kind of a continuation of that performative culture that I witnessed, saw among the hippies. I will stop there and then wait for your next question.
I know I have followed you. You have been writing plays and you have been writing newspaper articles as a columnist and seminar papers, sure. And in the meantime, you also write haiku, that very short poem on the ecological disaster or the crisis that we've been facing in this corner of the world. How come, haiku help you, address this very serious thing that people write a play, or you have written also play and written a lot of columns on it?
Yes, I mean, that column writing came a little later, but haiku came earlier than that. I have not been able to answer these questions myself because I have been writing my own memoirs and then trying to see why I got interested in the Japanese form of poetry, which is very simple, a 3-line poem, even though I don't. But follow the spirit, the Zen spirit in that poetry. And that was a very big jolly jump for me, a jump from the mega perception of nature, very performative, outgoing, and loud performativity that represented by the hippies. That was a very loud performative culture, loud color, loud kind of a dress. Some dress like sadhus, and then they smoked marijuana, gaza, etc., and then they frequently cities of here like Banaras and other places, and they came on foot. So they were very loud. This shift from the loud to this very quiet form of poetry, why? How did that happen? Now, I had not realized before you asked me this question, but when I find this answer is that I was always in search of the very fine, subtle in poetry, our culture. Jain culture is a quiet culture, actually. You say this by using very simple imageries and simple suggestive words, few words, and then sparse use of the colors and lines also in the paintings. And the rest was left for the performers, onlookers to fill up. So that attracted me. And also its philosophical side, like, for example, Baso, the first great haiku poet of Japan of the 16th century, his famous haiku, I say this in English, I read that in English. Old pond, leaf, splash, a frog. Old pond, first line, leaf, splash, a frog. He wrote, this poem became very famous, this haiku poem. That attracted me and the philosophy because, yes.
Okay, I think that I'm running out of time. The one more question. Yesterday in the opening session, Ashish Nandi made a remark that ecological issues haven't been politicized in this subcontinent. That was the gist of his address. How do you think a poet like you or a dramatist like you would politicize it? Could you just...
This is a process of politicizing. Politicizing has one connotation. Politicizing means it is done for the very narrow interests of the politicians, the conservative or whatever the nature of the politicians may be. They politicize everything, including the climate. Ajit Didi also used politics, for example, my ideal type of politics, but by using politics, she fought, she did not surrender. That is ecological. And this is not the first such seminar she has organized about the ecological subject. Many, I have attended many already. So that point that you raise about this politicizing the environment has a bigger picture about it. Politicizing the environment is the language, the lingo, idiom of the modern day world. The Glasgow conference, which is fresh in our memory, politicians politicize the ecology, and now it hasn't found a solution. It is running from one problem into another. So there is Ashish Nandi, perhaps he was referring to the politicization process, but why as writers and painters we are talking about ecology is because of the subtleness. We still hold confidence in our power of creativity, so we still harp on the creative power of the writers. We are not politicians, but we are sharp critic of those who politicize this very wonderful, subtle issue of environment.
Dr. Babu, like the 15 minutes given to me is over. Do you want me to continue? Or?
No. Thank you so much for concluding this session on time. Now, may I request both Bimal Guhaji's conversation with Professor Binay Barmanji from Bangladesh. Sir, may I request both of you to kindly start the proceeding?
Thank you so much. I congratulate poet Bimal Guha on this special occasion, and I convey my respects and greetings to all the audience who are witnessing this session. I have to interview a poet Bimal Guha. He is one of the most prominent poets and writers in Bangladesh. Last year, he received the most coveted literary prize, Bangla Academy Award. He has written so far 39 books. It's a huge number. He's mostly interested in poetry, though he is working in fiction and other areas. He was born in Chittagong and worked in Dhaka University. Also, he got his PhD from Dhaka University. He's a celebrated person. I am really proud of interviewing him. And regarding me, I am Binay Burman, working as a professor in the Department of English at Daffodil International University. It is located in Dhaka, Bangladesh. I am also interested in poetry, fiction, translation, and research. It's our routine work as a professor, a person of academia. Let me introduce some of the poetry books. Just I read the names so that you could understand what his themes might be, the themes of poetry. Some of the works of Bimal Guha, poet Bimal Guha. Ahankar Tomar Shabdo, pride your words. Chako par hole khola path. Open path after crossing the bridge. Shopne jole shortohin bhor. Unconditional dawn in dreams and waters. Bhalobashar kobita, poetry of love. Noshto Manush Onnanno Kobita, Spoiled Man and Other Poems, Protibadi Shabder Michil, The Procession of Rebellious Words, Amra Roechi Mati, We Are Here, Earth, Protteki Prithok Biplobi, Everybody Separate Rebel, Biborer Gan, The Song of Hole, and this year, in the February book fair in Dhaka, organized by Bangla Academy, he published his latest book, Ekun Matal Nritto. What an intoxicated dance. So that is the introduction for poet Bimal Guha. Now I would like to ask him a few questions. He's also my senior in literary exercise, so often I call him Bimal Da. So Bimal Da, are you ready? May I ask you a question?
Yes, of course, yes.
Okay.
We'll go our conversation. No problem. I pay my respect to Ajit Kautji, Dr. Suresh Babuji, Shivaji ji, and my very favorite person, Abhi Subediji. Okay, we can go on.
Okay.
Professor Binoy.
So I suppose this online conference of environment and literature, environment comes first. In the tradition of literature, if I look at Bangla, how literature and poetry evolved, particularly I can claim Bangla literature is rich with environmental issues, environmental themes and allusions, starting from Tagore through Jivanananda, then Al Mahmud, and all modern poets. Nobody could evade the attraction of nature. Literature and environment are closely connected. So what's your view? How do you find this connection in Bangla poetry and literature?
Oh, yes. Environment, we know, is the part of our life. Rather, we should say we are the part of environment or nature. Eventually, environment reflected in our literature. You have mentioned some favorite poets, Rabindranath Tagore, Jivananda Das, Shamsur Rahman, Al Mahmud, and so on. Mm, And in our poetry, in our poems, also, it is a normal practice. Environment should reflect in our poem also. You have mentioned one of my last book, uh, Ekon Matal Nitya. I should say, what a mad
Okay,
dance of
this is the
Corona.
book. That,
What a
yes,
mad
Ekun Matal
dance of
Nitya. Okay.
Corona.
Oh, okay.
Yes, this is also environment issue because Corona uh, put a very crucial scenario in our environment, and we are facing this problem till now. I was I was also affected, merely affected with corona, and I have um, written my poems during corona period. Thus have been uh, put in this book, in this last book. And I must say, environment and literature are this should go and always uh, uh, go side by side.
Okay, okay, thank you. Thank you. So environment is not the exclusive prerogative of the environmental workers and the Department of Disaster Management and Ecology. Literature and poetry has also its own share in environment. And we find it just from the early emergence of the theme of poetry from Kalidasa. So he first took the shelter of rains and the rhythm of rains and wind and nature, mountains and sky and everything. So that tradition also continues through the generations of poets. So Bimalda, I have the next question to you. Uh, if uh, you have utilized the symbols and allusions of nature, do you think the poets should explicitly bring the issue of environment in poetry and literature, because it may hamper the aesthetic values, aesthetic qualities of poetry? What's your view on it?
Now, poetry is a very important area of literature. It should address all issues of human life and society. The environmental problems are the big concern in our planet, I have mentioned, and will face in next decades also. We consider everything could be the subject matter of poetry. So it is reflected explicitly in poetry, and it might not hamper aesthetic quality. No, I believe not at all. Because aesthetic quality depends not only on the subject matter of poem, but on the way of expression by individual poet, keeping in mind the essential aesthetic values.
Yes, yes. So I'm really impressed when I was reading this book. Though earlier I read your books and wrote an article in the Daily Star, but this book is specific, and I really appreciate particularly this poem, which has utilized the natural themes, the symbols of nature. If I am allowed, I may read a few lines in Bangla and later my translations in English. So am I allowed to do that? I think it will not take much time.
Yeah, if you feel that it is apt, you kindly do it. There's no problem.
Okay, okay. First, Bangla stanza, and I don't know whether I'd be able to share my screen. Anyway, I'm reading from the book. A Rin, the name of the poem is Rin, debt. এই প্রকৃতির কাছে আমার অনেক আছে ঋণ। I don't know whether you have the sense of Bangla. Anyway, you can feel the rhythm of poetry. এই বায়ু প্রাণবীজ, এই নদী দিঘি ও সাগর, এই গিরিখাত পর্বত উপত্যকা দিগন্ত রেখা, এই প্রাণী জগৎ, মোহ জলাশয় ভর্তি ফেনা জল, এই গৃহ কিশলয় উঠোনের তৃণ গুল্মলতা, এই কাকড়ার ঝাঁক, পিলপিল পতঙ্গকুল, শামুক ঝিনুক, আমি এসবের কাছে ঋণী। This is the first stanza, and if I read the translation just for the international audience, okay, it will sound like this. The first stanza I'm reading. I owe much to nature, this air, seed of life, this lake and sea, this trench, valley and horizon, this animal world, fascination, foamy water, this house, plant, creeper in the yard, this crowd of crabs, insects, oysters and snails, I owe to them. So that was the first stanza. So that's very much environmental in theme, in its essence, its message. It will touch the heart not only of the environmental activists, but any reader, any person who will read this poem, and they will feel their obligation to protect nature. I think that is also one of the purposes of this great festival. Just arousing a feeling for nature. So that poem is especially important for this. So Bimalta, now you can say something before our session concludes. I think we have a few minutes. Your journey of writing as a poet and as a fiction writer, particularly we know you also write for children. So how did you start and how you went on as a writer, as a poet? Bimalda.
I have started my journey to literature suddenly, all on a sudden, I should say. And then I am so involved in it that I cannot come out of this throughout my life. So I think poetry and literature is a very important part for every people to contribute to the society, because society, poets and literators drive the society to advancement of and mental development of the people. So I want to contribute my society through my poetic sense and literary meanings. Poets are, we know poets are like saints, and in previous days, saints were poets and poets were saints. They governed the society to development of human values. Poets were always loud for peace and against any confrontation or any war or any bloodshed. So we are always for peace. And I have written some poems against war during this time. So poets and literatures are always in favor of peace and peaceful. They want a peaceful society. I think our time has finished in the meantime. I thank you all and thank you Ojitji, Shubediji, Shibaji and Sureshji, and thank you very much Professor Binoy Burman, my favorite person, very favorite person.
Thank you, Bimalda. Thank you. You have chosen me as your interviewer. I'm grateful to you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
So thank you so much both Sri Bimal Gohaji as well as Professor Binay Barmanji. But as Bimalji rightly pointed out that it is the poet who rules this earth, frankly speaking, because as it is said that apare kavya samsare kavireva prajapati. It is the poet who happened to be a Brahma who creates the another world. If a poet can't do, I think it cannot be done by anyone. So that is the power of a poet. So I sincerely thank and one more thing, as Professor Binay Barmanji rightly pointed out, that Kalidasa's environmental or ecological consciousness. In fact, I should say that he has borrowed this consciousness from Valmiki, because in all his poets, let it be Ruksamhara, let it be Vikramarvasya, Abhignana Shakuntala, or Raghuvamsha Kumarasambhava, or whatnot, he has, because Valmiki has categorically explained, and he brought the what I call so many medicinal herbs, I'll give just one example, that of Arani and Vostya. Because in the ancient days, to conduct a sacrifice, that is yajna, there is no fire. But how to create fire? They invented the concept of arani. There is one wood. If it is been rubbed with the other wood called vostya, so which creates the fire. So this is how those people went on survive and in the environment. So with these few words, on behalf of Dr. K. Srinivas Rao, Secretary Sahitya Academy, and Ajit Kaur ma'am, on behalf of Postwall, I sincerely thank all the four panelists, right from Professor Abhi Subhedi ji and Sri Shivraj Rinjal from Nepal, and Sri Bimal Guhaji and Professor Binay Barmanji from Bangladesh, for doing a beautiful conversation. And I sincerely thank all our viewers for sparing their valuable time. And above all, I should thank Ajit Kaur ma'am for her commitment and the relentlessness and the amount of patience that she possesses.
We want a few words from Kaur ma'am.
Find out.
Okay. So thank you so much. With this, the 12th session of the 3-day conference of today's part has come to an end, and we shall meet all for the knowledge of all the viewers. I would like to bring to this notice that tomorrow we shall meet at 10 a.m. sharp with a poetry session of 13th session. With this, have a nice day. Thank you.